Hi everyone, and welcome to Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 7 review. Guys, this is the penultimate episode. Can you believe that we only have one more episode to go this season? I can't either, but if you ask me, this episode cemented the destruction of the final remains of Tolkien in this show. Don't believe me? Then let's dive right into the review. Our man Celebrimbor is making the remaining 9 Rings of Power. We know that he's under illegally blonde Sauron's spell, so everything is nice and dandy for him. But Celebrimbor catches a glimpse of himself in the mirror, and for a second, something doesn't look right. So he's slowly growing suspicious. We'll get to that soon. Meanwhile, as we know, Eregion is actually under attack by Adar and his orcs. But no one, not even these soldiers, who you would think would have some experience in battle, no one has the slightest clue what to do. They're running around like headless chickens, waiting for Celebrimbor to give them some kind of instructions, and because he's not there, everyone turns to illegally blonde Sauron for guidance. He tells them that Lord Celebrimbor won't permit a counterattack. He says the river will protect us. Common sense and sense for self-preservation should have kicked in a long time ago for these elves. Do something to defend yourselves. You shouldn't need your lord or anyone to tell you that, especially if you're soldiers and your job is to defend the city, its people, and yourselves. Where is the commander of these soldiers? Why are you turning to a man who you believe to be a smith for military strategy? If you don't run away or retaliate, you are literally going to be pulverized by the boulders from the trebuchets before the orcs even get into Eregion. But what Sauron says is that they will not obey this alleged instruction by Celebrimbor because he's lost his mind. They have to fight. Good. If you consider that all of Eregion's population has the brains of NPCs, you probably do have to tell them to do the bare minimum and defend themselves. Our dear Myrddania is also here, and she's head over heels for Daddy Sauron.
I can change him.
Look, guys. No need to go to Numenor, we have a ship right here. Ah, but will it sail? Here we also need to mention the brilliant battle strategy of orcs. What they did was, they used the trebuchets to bomb not only Eregion, but the mountain behind it, so that the boulders fell down and stopped the flow of the river. The whole riverbed is dried out in, minutes? Honestly, I've seen so many strange things happen in this show, and in the previous season. The fact that this works, and how it works, doesn't even surprise me. Nothing does in this show. Hit me with a pyroclastic flow and watch me get back up. Meanwhile, Celebrimbor, still tucked away in his forge, instead of making rings, gets distracted and observes a mouse. Yes, Celebrimbor, one of the mightiest elven smiths, is talking to a mouse. He notices it's doing the same things over and over again, and he paints a candle and sees that it hasn't burnt at all, so that's also suspicious. Naturally, he shares this news with Illegally Blonde, and after a fight, Celebrimbor snaps out of the trance and sees the actual desolation around him. The forge is a mess, he's dirty and disheveled, and he realizes that the mithril that Sauron gave him last episode was just Sauron's black blood all along. Celebrimbor runs out to tell Myrddania that they have all been deceived. But Myrddania and the elf soldiers don't believe Celebrimbor because Sauron told them earlier that he's lost his mind, so they think he's cuckoo. Myrddania tries to reason with Celebrimbor, but as he wants to remove her hand from his shoulder, Sauron uses magic and makes it so that she flies over the railings right into the hands of the orcs, who finish her off. And of course it looks like Celebrimbor pushed her. Now, Sauron promises our Grandma Brimbor that he will spare Eregion if he finishes the rings. This show wants us to believe that Sauron's plan all along was for Adar to attack Eregion. So yeah, he basically wants the elves and the orcs fighting, chaos, great. But he also doesn't want Celebrimbor harmed because he needs them to finish the rings. And Sauron doesn't care what happens to Eregion afterwards, everyone knows that, even the little baby orcs. So why on earth would Celebrimbor believe Sauron when he says he will spare the city in exchange for the rings? No, of course he won't. He will have no further use of any of you once the rings are finished. Meanwhile, in Khazad-dûm, King Durin wants to keep mining, but Disa and Prince Durin are down at the mines protesting, I guess. They're standing there with their axes, looking menacingly, ready to fight anyone who the king might send. Yeah, these two are definitely gonna stop anyone that the king sends down there, potentially the whole army, since he is the king. They will do something, I'm sure, summon more bats, maybe, yeah. But how convenient it is that Narvi decides to stand with Durin and Disa, rebel against the king, and so do all the dwarves who are there. No fighting necessary, we're all on the same page, let's go deal with the crazy king. We'll continue this subplot shortly, but what I also want to mention first is that Elrond comes to Khazad-dûm because he needs the dwarves' help to fight Adar and Sauron. Fast forward a little bit, and Elrond, now somehow commander of an army of elves, arrives to Eregion. And this is a scene that very clearly tries to mimic the charge of the Rohirrim, but of course, to no one's surprise, the scene in the Rings of Power falls flat on its face like Myrdania. Why is this scene particularly bad? Okay, so we have the elves charging, we have the orcs growling, the elves are approaching at full speed, and then, gasp! The orcs reveal that they have a wild Galadriel in a cage, and Elrond stops the charge. It's as simple as that, kids. It's Rings of Power, after all. They have, hundreds of horsemen and horsewomen charging at the orcs, and they all stop a few meters before the enemy line. Neatly, no bumping into each other, everyone heard Elrond, even the elves at the very back. That's totally how battles work. But also, all sense of urgency is gone. There's no expectation or suspense if a charge can just be paused like a video game. I'm pretty sure it didn't even last a minute. So then in the next scene, we have Adar and Elrond negotiating in Adar's tent. Elrond wants Galadriel and Orc Daddy wants the ring so that it could help him defeat Sauron. Elrond refuses and says, "I've changed my mind actually, I do want to fight you now if that's how things are gonna be." See, Elrond is very confident that they can win because he thinks Durin and the dwarves will be their secret weapon. But honestly, Elrond and Galadriel could have been slain in this tent on the spot. Adar had no reason to let you guys go. He could take your lives to further demoralize the elves and just continue with the attack. He could have slain you and searched you, and guess what he would find, Elrond, dangling around your neck? That's right, Elrond is wearing Nenya on a necklace tucked away from view. Now, after this conversation with Adar, we know that he didn't bring it for negotiation. We also know that Elrond is suspicious of the ring's power, so he likely wouldn't bring it to the battlefield with the belief that it would help them win. Yes, his doubts about the ring have been challenged slightly after Galadriel used it for healing a fellow elf, but I hardly think that was enough to completely change Elrond's mindset. Considering what Elrond actually intends to do, the ring would be far safer, literally anywhere, but with him at this point. So there can only be one reason why he brought it to battle. Plot convenience. Also, if the show hasn't been spitting on Tolkien's grave all along, it now decides to take a dump on it with the following scene. Galadriel and Elrond kiss. I was so worried about Galadriel and Sauron potentially having a kiss scene, maybe in one of the flashbacks, but oh, what was waiting for us just around the corner. For anyone who needs a reminder, Galadriel is Elrond's mother-in-law. Elrond is married to Celebrimbor, Galadriel's daughter, and Galadriel has a husband, Celeborn, who the show has even mentioned in the first season. I guess Rings of Power saw how well House of the Dragon was doing and said, "Yeah, let's sprinkle in some Sweet Home Alabama." I have no other explanation for this. Prince Durin in Khazad-dûm is giving a speech, hyping the dwarves up for battle. He does a bit of poetry too. "Fight with me so all the world can see that dwarven loyalty is a force stronger than any sorcery." Batwoman Disa and now Shakespeare Durin, they spoil us too much. So we have this scene, then we have one other scene at Eregion, and then we're back at Khazad-dûm just a few minutes later, and it's revealed that the dwarves actually can't send an army to help, after all. Why, you ask? Well, King Durin went down to the mines, started fighting his own men, and now they fear he will keep digging and release the Balrog. The dwarves don't know it's a Balrog, they don't even know where it is, they just know there's a beast down there. So the dwarves might need an army if something happens to Khazad-dûm, and they can't risk sending their men to Eregion, seems to be the implication. Now, we're talking about a potential threat, a beast for which you don't even know where it is or what it is exactly. Plus, with all the rebel dwarves, all of you can't join forces and incapacitate one elderly king, take his axe and get the ring off his finger? Really? But back at the battlefield in Eregion, they continue to fight into the night. Galadriel escapes and finds herself in the middle of the orc camp, where the orcs are mourning their fallen brothers. They put them on funeral pyres and say goodbye to them. This show is insistent on giving orcs as much humanity as possible, as we already know, because in 2024 we can't have orcs that are evil because they're evil. But honestly, I can't be bothered to even discuss this further, so we're moving on. Feel free to add something in the comments if you want. Galadriel almost gets recaptured, but we haven't seen Arondir in a while, so it's his time to shine and help her escape. Sauron gives Celebrimbor a little speech about how he too was a victim. Celebrimbor calls him out on his gaslighting. Then, when Sauron leaves, for whatever reason, Celebrimbor tries to burn the rings that he just made. What he does manage to do, however, is chop off his finger so that he can slip off his shackles. He leaves, and his concerned soldiers find him outside and try to drag him back because they think he's nuts. Galadriel conveniently finds him, and he gives her the rings. I know he's not in his right mind, but yes, let's give Galadriel all the rings of power, well, the 9 rings of power. She has proven herself to be a huge liability. No one knows this better than Celebrimbor, who got deceived by Sauron specifically because Galadriel refused to say anything to him other than, "Don't do any business with Halbrand anymore." So the elves are still fighting, and this female elf from the Fellowship of the Whigs gets a moment to shine. She gets Boromired, but to no one's surprise, after this line of foreshadowing, she manages to make her shot, despite looking like my pincushion when I'm sewing cosplay outfits. The orcs send in a troll. Arondir deals with him, along with Elrond and Gil-galad. By the way, Gil-galad has been there when they charged at the orcs, but then he disappears for most of the episode and shows up again, precisely when he means to help slay the troll. And Elrond is like, "Oh, High King, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here." But it's not like he only just now showed up to the battlefield, he's been here all along. Where exactly is anyone's guess? Maybe he's been trying on Sauron's wigs for size, maybe he's thinking of going blonde too. And then suddenly, it's daylight again. A messenger, another one from the Fellowship of the Whigs, he returns and tells them that the dwarves aren't coming after all. Demoralized, Elrond sits back as his fellow comrades continue to fight. Arondir faces Adar, and I guess he dies. It's a bit unclear. He gets stabbed, but we don't know if it was fatal. Either way, it doesn't make much of a difference, I think. And now Adar can finally take the ring from Elrond, which is conveniently around his neck. Remember Lord of the Rings, guys? They put a ring on a necklace too. So, yeah, Adar has Nenya. Great. I swear, if it turns him good, or worse, into Celeborn, as some of you have been speculating, that Adar is actually Celeborn, well, that would be the final nail in the coffin now, wouldn't it? Considering how little happened in this season of The Rings of Power and how things dragged on, this episode had a surprising amount of action packed in, but it was all over the place, things happening in very quick succession, without much time for the audience to process what had just happened or for anything to be truly meaningful. Ah, the elves are charging, but now they're not. Ah, the dwarves are coming, but wait, no, they're not. So, yeah, I guess that's it for this episode of The Rings of Power. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for watching. I have some Rings of Power themed merch if you're interested. The link will be in the description box, and I will see you back next Saturday for episode 8 review, the final episode of this season. Until then, never forget.
The sea is always right!
The sea is always right!